Hello everybody, Jardian here. Today I wanted to make a quick review of the old cold steel Kriegsmesser or Grosse, which I had found in a pawn shop a few weeks back. Check out the last video if you want to hear about that and see some more cutting with the sword. Now I hate to start videos with the boring stuff like disclaimers and specs, but I want to cover something that I brought up in the last video with the sword, and that is that new cold steel put out a new Kriegsmesser a few months ago, which really diminishes any value this review could have had, as I think most people would just go for the new model. The real niche that this old model had was that while it's not a cheap sword, it was the cheapest functional messer on the market for a very long time. Especially as HEMA was just getting big. Over the years I've seen so many threads of people asking, where can I get a functional Kriegsmesser? And one way or another, cold steel would always end up in the conversation. Either people saying, no, don't get it, it is a messer-shaped object, or other people saying, well, it's the best way you can get into cutting with a Kriegsmesser. One thing I should mention before I forget is that this sword does come with a nice scabbard. It is a wooden core wrapped in leather with metal fittings on the top and bottom. Now mine was used and not treated very nicely, so it had some rust at the mouth, but that's really nothing. You can see the wood is a bit chipped inside. Nevertheless, having the scabbard is a pretty big plus. I do not believe that the new model of Kriegsmesser comes with one. And now I'd like to get into the specs, the feel, and the reputation this sword has. Now, I'm not going to be breaking any new ground here. Cold Steel has always had a reputation for their swords being overbuilt, pretty clunky, but very tough beaters, and I'm going to be saying the same things here. While I discuss this, I'm going to put up a comparison of the old Cold Steel Kriegsmesser specs versus the new one. These are both from Cult of Athena, and I can vouch that for the old one, they are dead on with the measurements. My sword is exactly 42 inches. The balance is right between 5 1/4 and 5 1/2 inches above the guard. The handle is exactly 10 inches with 9 inches of holdable portion, and the blade is a perfect 32 if you include the thickness of the guard. This sword is 3.5 pounds, which is nothing to scoff at. I haven't owned a sword that heavy since I had the Cold Steel Greatsword many years ago. Now, this weight isn't really something that you're going to notice if you're just doing some cutting or some light swinging, but if you really go out and train with this thing, it is a beast. This sword's weight, coupled with its relatively high point of balance, give it a sluggish feel in the hand. Or a nicer way to put that is that it feels like a real chopper rather than a fine slicing sword. Though I'm saying all that, keep in mind I'm not saying it's bad for everybody. Cold Steel has their market. They make nice, heavy, overbuilt swords, which people can take in their backyards. They can beat the crap out of them, they can hit branches, whatever they want, and those swords will survive. Just that for many years this sword fell into a position where people who wanted an accurate Kriegsmesser were kind of forced to settle for it or pay a very high amount, as Albion was the first ones to really come out with a good Kriegsmesser back in the day. Now, to wrap up this portion, let's again look at the specs with the new Kriegsmesser on the right. The big things to notice are that it's about 2 inches longer, most of that being in the blade, with a point of balance that's 1 1/4 inches lower, which you love to see. It's 2 ounces lighter overall, and this is largely in part due to the taper they added. Now, on the old model, you can see they list the taper on the thickness as 0.4 millimeters total, which I think we can all agree is about nothing. While on the new model, it begins 2 millimeters thicker. However, it has a 4 millimeters of distal taper, and that is something you like to see. And all I'm getting at with all of this is that the things I noticed about the sword, the fact that it's pretty heavy and clunky, these are all things that are well known and have been addressed. So I'm not complaining, I'm just saying how the sword is and how it handles, and the fact that Cold Steel has actually listened and made changes. Nevertheless, the one I have is the old clunker, and I'm going to finish this up by just talking about how I've been enjoying it. And honestly, despite all the things I said about the weight and the feel, it's very fun to have. Again, not everything needs to be a fine-tuned, optimized, and accurate sword. Sometimes just having a nice beater like this is what you want. I haven't enjoyed cutting this much in a long time. I've gone through a lot of bottles with this thing after I got the edge good, and it's been a really good time. It's also the kind of sword that I can give to people and not have to worry about it. I gave this sword to my friend who's never cut before. First swing, he smacked it straight down into the stand and chunked it out, and the sword is absolutely fine. The edge wasn't even rolled that badly, and you know, there is some value in that. Sword can be a bit heavy and hard to move around, but once you get it going, it's going, and as long as you can kind of move with the weight, it's really fun to swing around. I wouldn't recommend doing any short or choppy motions with it, as I actually popped one of my wrists doing that, but overall, I mean, it's just a really neat piece to have in the collection. Due to the new model being out, this isn't trying to be like a serious review or telling you if you should buy it, but I will say, looking at the price it still goes for, which I believe is around $280 to $300, I'm not sure if I would buy it full price. I'm a lucky little boy who got it very cheap. It depends on what you want out of the sword and what other messers are on the market now, which I don't really keep track of. Generally, I would say if you could find this used, like secondhand, which I'm sure some people will be selling theirs due to the new model, I would say grab it if you want this kind of beefy chopper. There's nothing really wrong with it for what it is, as long as you recognize it's not going to be accurate or very lively or light or easy to swing, but it's just what it is. If you wanted a Kriegsmesser shaped sword that you could really abuse and beat up, then hey, I mean, here it is. For most people, I do think that the new Cold Steel Kriegsmesser model is going to be more what they want. Again, I'm just going off the specs that I see, but seeing that lower point of balance and longer blade and a slightly lower weight makes it seem like that would be a much better choice, even if it's a bit more expensive. Sword has been a fine cutter ever since I worked on it, and it's given me a lot of fun, and I think that's all I really needed to say. Thank you to everybody who sat through this. I always go on longer than I want to. Take it easy. I will see you next time.